Do you think we're going to live till the year 2030? Because I'm not convinced. I'm Liron Shapira, and this is Doom Debates. Welcome, everybody. You are listening to Doom Debates. I am an AI doomer. I think the world is going to end soon, and I've been having a bunch of debates with people about it where they come and tell me why it's going to be fine. We're not going to have doom, and then I tell them, yes, we are. And I've done this so many times that I realize I need to collect this all in a podcast feed for your listening pleasure. And for our first episode, I've brought on my good friend Ori Nagel, who is actually not going to debate me because he's also become another doomer. But he is going to be a great conversation partner because I've known him since I was like 12 in middle school. We went to the same youth group. We've stayed friends since then. He often weighs in on a lot of the stuff I'm doing. He gives me PR advice because that's his professional specialization. And he has also been getting progressively more worried about Doom. So he's going to be giving you his 2 cents on that issue. And then we're just going to talk about like what we're all about and what we value and how we're going to make a good podcast.
All right. Sounds good, Liron. And what's up, everyone?
What's up?
What's up? So, Liron, Doom Debates. This is your podcast. And what do you want to talk about?
I got to say, this is a very meaningful moment for me because I've been listening to podcasts since, I'm trying to think how far back, since like 2009, near the dawn of podcasting. I've been listening to like nonstop hours a day of podcasts, and the whole time I didn't make one. Why didn't I make one? The only reason I'm finally decided, hey, it's time, is because I've been putting out a bunch of content already. So now I'm like, great, people just want this content aggregated in a podcast feed with some light editing. And then also I can supplement it. I can bring on a few more people who I think are really smart, who I think the world needs to hear about. So like, I'm now confident that for sure I'm going to get to 12 episodes. I'm going to get to 12 times 12 equals 144 episodes. Okay.
Whoa,
that's a promise to you.
Here? Oh
a
my
prediction.
God.
Yeah. 12 squared.
I take that back. That's too many, man.
No, I think I can do it because it's just a matter of continuing the sustained effort that I've already done over the last year and a half, talking about AI Doom on Twitter, getting on a bunch of other people's interviews. I've done a bunch of media. I was on Robert Wright the other day. I was on one I can't even talk about. So I think this is just like a thing that I do now is talk a lot, put out a lot of media on AI Doom, and that's why I'm confident I'm going to have a lot of episodes of this podcast. And also I've even done like some monologue stuff where I just like go find interesting articles and like explain them to the layman because, why me, right? When there's definitely smarter people more knowledgeable about AI, but you know how you can mix two different skills together and then suddenly you could be close to the top of this mixed skill. So the skills I'm mixing are like number one, being a longtime AI doomer who's deeply studied Less Wrong and Eliezer Yudkowsky sequences and a number of other writings, and really internalize them and understanding why we're doomed. Combine that at the intersection of this other skill, which is just like talking in a way that's pretty understandable, not too complex, relatively entertaining, relatively short and sweet. So I think combining those two skills puts me in a pretty unique group.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's worth expanding a little bit more about your background. I mean, because okay, those are two skills you have that you'll bring to the subject. But well, I guess there are two questions. One is this what is the focus of this podcast? I mean, it's called Doom Debates. So is it just going to be on AI, or is it going to be on AI and climate change and some other hot topics? So that's one question. Yeah.
Yeah. Great question. So I've written a description, Doom Debates, urgent disagreements that must be resolved before the world ends.
Okay.
So if somebody is a nuclear doomer, like Annie Jacobson wrote a really great book that came out a couple months ago about how nuclear war is a huge threat. If she wants to come on and talk to me about why we're doomed because of nukes, that is an urgent disagreement. I mean, I actually agree with her, but maybe we'll find somebody who disagrees. And it must be resolved before the world ends. Totally, right? If somebody wants to talk about biodoom, sure. But that said, I think the king of all dooms, the one that's the most urgent and important, is AI Doom, right? So I'm an AI Doomer, and I expect that most of the episodes of this podcast will just be me raising the red flag, waving my arms around, being like, hey, we're doomed. And then somebody else will be there and they'll be like, no, we're actually fine. Like, look at all this stuff that's good. And then we're just going to hash it out. And then hopefully hopefully there's an impact, a downstream impact from this, where maybe people will listen to the podcast and they'll be like, hey, I feel like the people telling Liron everything's fine don't really understand what Liron's saying. I feel like it's a little one-sided here, and
Mm.
we actually are doomed. And maybe we should like pause AI, which is my current policy recommendation. So that's kind of my hope. Or potentially, I guess there's another outcome, which is like some of the people who come and tell me that we're not doomed. Maybe they'll convince me, and then if that happens, great. I will probably at that point stop the podcast and just get a different hobby.
Right. Well, could you be convinced in one debate, or will it take a few?
So I mean, in theory, I could be convinced in one debate,
Okay. All
but
right.
I would probably have to do some follow-up research. But like,
Okay.
it is worth saying that like I'm not like I'm not a born doomer, right? It's not like my whole life I've been saying the sky is falling, we're doomed.
Yeah.
I'm just somebody who likes taking a position that I think is strong, right? So like I get a kick out of being like, hey, a lot of people are acting like things are normal and they think AI is only at risk of like taking some jobs, whereas I'm pointing out that the world is literally ending, right? So I enjoy the contrarianism of that position. I'm a natural
Yeah.
contrarian.
Right.
Um, but I could be contrarian on anything, right? Like I have a big menu of things that I could be contrarian about. I could just go learn about any field, right? So I could go into quantum mechanics, and in quantum mechanics, I'm really big on the many worlds interpretation being correct, for instance. So
Yeah.
it's about like, I mean, I'm kind of with majority at this point. I think it's more like 60% believe me, but like those other
Okay.
40%, I can go really hardcore attacking their side, right? So like I'm happy to just take up strong positions in any field that I go into. Like it doesn't just have to be AI Doom. And I spent most of 2022 focusing on Twitter on just dunking on crypto VCs and pointing out how ridiculous it is to think that blockchain technology is going to enable a use case that has nothing to do with cryptocurrency, right? Because there's this whole Web3 movement when people are like, social media is going to be all about blockchain technology, and blockchain technology is going to like free people to be able to interact better on the social web. Like nonsensical pitches, right? Which of course amounted to zero. Like I was totally right about that. But I spent 2022 doing that because I'm like, wow, Andreessen Horowitz has a $7 million crypto fund that's all pouring into stuff that's going to be a zero. That's funny. Like that's worth
Yeah.
a dunk, right? So like I'm happy to
Right.
seek out contrarian positions in any field, and I'm not going to lack for hobbies if AI Doom doesn't become a thing. Like I'm happy to just be like, oh wow, hey, somebody had a really good argument why we're not doomed, and off the top of my head, that specific argument could, for instance, be like, hey, scaling is going to plateau. Like, look at these reasons why scaling plateaus. I'm not going to like, die on the hill of being like scaling must not plateau. If somebody has a reason why scaling is going to plateau and we have a century to figure it out, great. I'm happy to hear that. Like, I'm not going to be like, no, I'm going to lose ad revenue from this podcast. Like, that's totally fine. I have other hobbies that I can get. I'm just an AI doomer because I really think that we're doomed from AI. Okay, so I hope that people will give me the benefit of the doubt that
Yeah.
I'm letting my behavior about what I want to argue about be downstream, causally downstream of the actual quality of the argument. Like I'm doing a Doom podcast because I actually believe that we're doomed because of the quality of the argument that we're doomed. So it goes that way, not the other way where first I'm a doomer and then I find some topic that tells us we're doomed and then go from there. It didn't go that way.
Right. Or put another way, what you're saying is that you're open to changing your mind. Like if someone comes with
Yes,
a persuasive argument, you may change your mind.
exactly right. Yeah, and just a little about me as a person. So I'm a self-diagnosed Aspie. I'm a I'm a rational person, relatively low emotion person.
Yeah.
So my mind is a calm place, right? Like the tide is low, so I can see the sandy beach of logic because there's not a lot of waves and tide washing it out. So so it's pretty easy for me to just like take other positions. Like it's not a big deal. Like I feel like I can flip all the different bits of my beliefs and it's just like not a problem, right? I can, the same way that a computer compiles a program, it's pretty easy for me to imagine just writing, okay, these are your beliefs, act accordingly, right? And then here's an algorithm to update your beliefs. It's called Bayesian reasoning, right? It's when you collect evidence and then use the evidence to help write your beliefs. Like that's not hard for me to do. I know it's a little bit unnatural for humans because it's like, hey, I don't want to take on a belief if it's going to like alienate my tribe, right?
Yeah.
So that's a natural human reaction. Like I want people to like me and feel like I'm on the same page as them. That's like a natural human reaction.
Yeah.
I'm the opposite. I'm more of the contrarian side where it's like, oh wow, nice. I get to do a belief that'll put me in a position of being more correct than everybody else, and then I
Yeah.
have to like explain how they're wrong, and then eventually they'll learn, and then they'll realize like I should be the king because I knew the more correct belief, right? Like
Yeah.
obviously in practice it doesn't play out like that. It's more likely to get people pissed off at me. And, there's probably a reason why most people aren't contrarians. It probably isn't a great way to gain status in most cases, but that's how I'm wired, right? So I'm just saying the point of all this is that, like, I don't have a problem just changing my mind. I'm not psychologically opposed to changing my mind. I'm not a high anxiety person, right? So I'm not the reason I went into AI Doom isn't because it's a fit for my level of anxiety. I wake up and I'm like, oh, it's a great day. Time to, like, explain why we're doomed, but, like, or I'm happy to explain something else. Like, time to explain something, right? Just that something happens to be why we're doomed.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you think listeners should know about you? I mean, like, why should we listen to your opinion on this, right? You talked a lot about, yeah, you try to see things in a logical way. It's your natural disposition. I mean, you were interested in the spheres from for a long time now, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, maybe
No,
that's
it's a
worth
great
mentioning.
question. Yeah, what's my credibility in
Yeah.
term? So I don't have a PhD. I have a bachelor's in computer science from UC Berkeley with high honors. For what that's worth, I do software engineering. I'm a 10x engineer. I've been studying AI Doom since 2007. I know
Yeah.
quite a lot about it. At the end of the day, though, and as we discussed before, right? So, like, I know the art of rationality. I know the principle of letting evidence write your beliefs instead of defending your beliefs. I know how to avoid things like wishful thinking, anchoring bias. I know how to, the idea of confirmation bias, for example, I know how to avoid, right? It's like all these failure modes that make people think worse. I have studied and have a lot of protections against. So, like, I'm
Mm,
a pretty rational guy.
mhm,
So to the extent that that makes you want to listen to me more and just trust whatever I say, great. You can use that as a starting point to predict how good I'm going to argue. But at
mhm,
the end of the day, you can also just see me as having zero credibility, just being a random guy. Don't worry about who I am. Just go into my debates, listen to the arguments that I'm making, follow the arguments, judge the arguments locally, meaning without even using the context of who Liron Shapiro is. Just judge the arguments, compare them to the arguments that the other person is saying, and just go based on the arguments. And maybe eventually, if you listen to enough of my arguments, you might say, like, Liron has, like, a pattern of having good arguments that are well justified, and he himself is as likely as I am to notice when his arguments need to be changed. So I trust him so much that I don't even have to notice when he's wrong. He'll notice when he's wrong, right? So if you want to build up that level of trust in me personally, go for it. But at the end of the day, you can pretend that I have no credibility and you're just listening to my arguments.
yeah. I mean, I think that's the case for me. I've found you to be a pretty trustworthy person as far as just making arguments about, I don't know, technology or things in the future. So yeah, I think you mostly call balls and strikes as you see it. You
Well,
know,
this is why we have to everybody has to listen to the Ori Nagel episode first so that they can go into the other episode knowing that I'm a highly credible source.
exactly. I just gave you that vote of confidence, and now everyone's with me on that. So, who are you going to debate?
Well, you can see on my YouTube, I have a few random debates I've already posted. One answer is just anybody who's interesting on Twitter that I want to have a longer exchange with. I can invite them to a Twitter space or just directly, like, come on Zoom, call me one on one. We'll hash it out for like 45 minutes and then I'll post it here for everybody's enjoyment. I think it's productive to even debate random people who have, like, no reputation as long as they have a pretty interesting point of view. They come and debate me, and it's interesting because they bring up points that aren't just the only points you can bring up, right? Like, the other side is so complex. You can have so many different positions
Yeah,
that it's just interesting to have me address different positions, right? Or to have the audience explore my opinions on those particular sub points of the large review that we're not doomed. Just as an example, on Twitter you have the EAC, they call themselves the accelerationists, and they're just like, AI risk is pretty minimal. FOOM risk, recursive self-improvement, is a very low risk, at least not rapid. There's going to be a nice slow takeoff. Progress is always good. It's just going to be continuous with other tech progress. That's kind of their position. And then you have other people being like, yeah, recursive self-improvement is very scary, but I just don't even think that computers will ever get to the level of the human brain because the human brain is just, like, so different, and the human brain is like a quantum computer or it's a thermodynamic computer, right? There's, like, all these other, like, I even call it the doom train. The doom train is like the train logically to believing that we're doomed, and the doom train has a lot of different stops where you can get off. So one of the earliest stops you can get off the doom train is you can say we're not doomed because silicon computers are just never gonna be competitive with brains in how good they are at thinking and reasoning and being powerful in the world. So that's like a very early stop in the doom train. Is you basically um, dismiss silicon.
Right, right. So you're open to debating interesting people on Twitter, accelerationists, but it could be someone who has a prominent profile or someone who maybe has no profile at all.
Exactly,
And
yeah. A couple of good debates I've done in the past are I did one with George Hotz, who's a really smart guy that a lot of people respect his opinion for good reason. I debated him on the AI Doom front, and it felt like his opinions were not super fully baked when he had them because he was kind of jumping around. So I'll post that in the feed. I think a lot of people will enjoy it. But that's an example of somebody relatively prominent that I've had a debate with. I had a debate with a bunch of accelerationists. I think Bayes Lord was in the debate. That was a very rowdy debate because there was no moderator. It was kind of like me wandering into the lion's den and debating them on their turf. The ideal episode of Doom debates would be something like that Monk debates episode from last year when we had Jan LeCun, Max Tegmark, Yoshio Bengio, Melanie Mitchell, because those were all smart people. They all had well thought out positions. They hashed it out in a very high quality format, a lot of mutual respect, and we all got to learn a little bit about what their positions are. And it also just it elevated the prominence, right? It moved the Overton window toward like, yes, this is a huge deal. Like we need to be debating this. So that would be kind of like the pinnacle of an ideal Doom debate. Maybe more in depth, maybe twice as long, with the moderator being a little bit more focused on the cruxes, try to like get more. Um, Basically just try to get more sparks going because I just felt the monk debate was, it just wasn't super fast paced and then time ran out so quick. But like my point is I may moderate debates between other people that I think are high quality if I think that it just sheds light, right? Especially if prominent people want to debate, if they consider me a good moderator. I'm obviously biased because I think that we're doomed, so I might have to find a different moderator, but I might lay down some rules that some other moderator can use to maintain a good debate. Also on the question of who am I going to invite, there's also a number of people that I think are super, they're not well known, they're super low profile, and if I could just like ask them some pointed questions about what they're working on or what they think, I think it's fascinating stuff. And like I meet them just in the course of like wandering around, going to conferences, hanging out with like the less wrong rationalist crowd. And these are just like fascinating people. And somebody just needs to like ask them the right questions and like teach the world about what they have to say on the topic of AI doom and rationality and related topics. So I'm going to be inviting some of those people too.
nice. All right. Well, let's lay out the proverbial red carpet. I mean, let's say the floor is yours. Who would you like to debate and why?
Um, I'll say Jan LeCun because he is in a position where he's super prominent. He leads, I don't think that he has direct reports, but he's the thought leader of AI at Meta. And what Mark Zuckerberg recently said about how Meta's mission is basically to develop toward open source AGI sounds like he's been listening to Jan LeCun. So Jan LeCun's highly influential. He's obviously a smart guy. He is an accomplished guy. He won the 2018 Turing Award. But he goes around on X on Twitter telling everybody that there's literally his words like a less than 0.001% chance of doom from AI, which is just wildly miscalibrated. That you would think that the chance is that low. Like for God's sake, give me a 1% chance, please, sir. You can't even give me a 1% chance when there's like if you just look around as a purely like social proof thing, this letter is getting signed that it's an existential risk comparable to nukes, and he sees all that and he still doesn't think, hey, you know what? Maybe just purely in the interest of unknown unknowns. Like
Hmm.
maybe something is wrong with my own thought process, and I'm going to assign a 1% probability to that. Like nope, 0.0001% according to Jan LeCun. So yeah, he's somebody where if you just look at the arguments he makes locally, he says a bunch of stuff that is like so clearly wrong. I mean, even if at the end of the day he turns out to be right that we're not all going to die,
Hmm.
great. But the way he argues for it, he just throws out a bunch of really poor arguments. So I would love to get a. I know he agreed to that one debate last year, which was great. I
Hmm.
respect that. He hasn't blocked me on Twitter. I respect that.
Yeah.
Um, if he wants to come on the podcast, he's more than welcome to.
All right. Well, you're setting your bar high. That's one of the top.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I went straight to the
It's
top.
one of the top most
Yeah,
respected sort of AI acceleration voices.
right, exactly. And of course, Mark Andreessen, but I mean, the fact, he blocked me, so I doubt he's going to turn around and go on the podcast. But
Right.
yeah, Mark Andreessen, because I'm thinking of like prominent people who think everything is fine with AI, who really haven't subjected themselves to pretty basic levels of debate. I mean, Mark Andreessen has never done debated an AI doomer. Jan LeCun, to his credit, did it once, right? Good for him.
Yeah.
Another person who's very pro AI, or not worried about AI, is Steven Pinker. And I love Steven Pinker, right? Like his books, I consider out of the top 10 books I've ever read in my life, I'd probably give 2 or 3 to Steven Pinker. Like How the
Sure.
Mind Works, just amazing books that he writes. Like
Yeah.
amazing guy.
Yeah.
But on the topic of AI, he's like terrible. He does not even engage with the most basic arguments. He
Right.
really is dismissive, and he's apparently trying to shoehorn AI into his patterns of saying, hey, the rational optimist, or his book is, I forgot what his book was called, The Better Angels of Our Nature. He makes a lot of good points about how life is getting way better, but then he's like, and look, AI is going to like continue making life way better. But it's like, hold on, Steven Pinker, like there's actually arguments you have to engage with. Like this is going to break your trend. It's going to stop getting better if AI takes over the world. So yeah, I'd love to have Steven Pinker on and hash it out, which brings me to the next guy in the same vein, David Deutsch.
David Deutsch. All right.
Another guy who's written 2 amazing books, right? The Fabric of Reality and The Beginning of Infinity. Really great books. And just, the way he is a many worlds enthusiast, right? The many worlds interpretation of quantum theory, I think he's spot on. He has a really lucid explanation of that in his book. So respect the hell out of David Deutsch as well. But again, once again, on the AI front, he loves to say that AI has not shown like true creativity. AI has not shown the ability to create new knowledge. So I went on X and I like constantly, it's like I do this like every couple months. I can't help myself. I go on X and I'm like, all right, somebody come tell me what it means for an AI to not be able to create new knowledge. Like give me a sample input output that shows somebody creating new knowledge that you think an AI can't also do. And nobody ever does it. And then people come in and they're like, I'll give you a sample input output. The input is, please tell me the geometry of the shape. And the output is, I don't feel like doing that. And I'm like, okay, can't you just like give a system prompt to a GPT saying like act like a spoiled brat, and then and now respond to the following prompt, and then it'll do that? Like, do you think acting like a spoiled brat is not something that current LLMs can do? And like, you don't get it, man. They have to just choose to do it. And like, okay, I'm just asking for an input output, man. You like follow the format. Give me JSON formatted input output, and I'll try to produce it.
I mean, on the subject of David Deutsch, I saw the tweet that you made of you took a CAPTCHA and then you made it the David Deutsch CAPTCHA. Describe that. Describe that to people.
Yeah, sure. So last year, inspiration struck me where I'm like, okay, David Deutsch thinks that AIs are far below humans because they can't create new knowledge. His words, create new knowledge. I actually don't know what he means by that. So if that really is a differentiation between humans and AIs, let's use that as a CAPTCHA, right? If I'm trying to visit Pornhub using a VPN, they're going to want to see me create new knowledge before they'll let me access it, because that's a surefire proof that I'm a human and not an AI.
That's all you gotta do. Just create new knowledge.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I can create new zygotes when I'm on Pornhub, but I can't create new knowledge.
Wow, it's a brilliant idea. It's a brilliant idea. Okay, well, you're going after the some of the big names who all have their own unique arguments, their own unique takes, and it would be so cool to watch you or to hear you have a debate with one of those people. But I guess me as a listener, I'd be interested in maybe someone who shares those views, like a Deutscher, or someone who
Hmm.
really agrees with Mark Andreessen. Like, how about someone like that?
Yeah. Just debate somebody who's, even if it's not the leader of the movement himself, it's just somebody who's like, hey, I'm a believer of this movement, right? And that's, I mean, to be fair, I'm very much kind of a member of the Yudkowskian movement, right? Eliezer Yudkowsky. I mean, the delta between why I think we're doomed and why Eliezer Yudkowsky thinks we're doomed is virtually zero, right? I just think that Eliezer, is just underrated. I think he figured out so many key principles of why we're doomed, and the world has just been slowly catching up, right? So I often joke that Liron Shapira, I'm just a stochastic parrot for the less wrong sequences written by Eliezer Yudkowsky. I haven't created much new knowledge. I'm just trying to, catch people up. I'm just doing arbitrage. I'm like, this knowledge is true. Like, I'm just trying to disseminate it.
All right, maybe you should have one episode where it's just an LLM just trained on the less wrong sequences and just have that
Yeah.
interact with your. on
Yeah,
the opposing side.
I could. I've debated LLMs before on a couple points, and it's interesting. It's an interesting a way to explore their limitations, and it's kind of funny because I found that they have limitations that are kind of similar to human limitations, which is like I'll ask them a question and they'll bust out like a bunch of points, right, like a bullet point list. But then when I try to drill down, I'm like, well, what about this? Like, tell me more. And I guess the example that comes to my mind is on the blockchain stuff. I was like, okay, explain why blockchain has a use case, like list some use cases. And it's like, well, blockchain has a use case in, for example, like tracking a shipment. It can have it can have a decentralized database so anybody can see like where the shipments are going. And then
Yeah.
I keep pressing it. I'm like, well, wait, what are the advantages to just not using a regular database? And it's like, oh, blockchain has a bunch of advantages like decentralization, double spend prevention, right? Like it kept listing these bullet point buzzwords like cryptography, like zero knowledge proof. Like it kept listing. I'm like, wait, in this specific example, right? I'm just trying to send a package.
Yeah.
Like, don't generalize. Just tell me this one package that I'm sending. Like, why can't UPS just maintain the database and publish it, publish data
Right.
dumps, right? And when I kept drilling it on the specific example, of course, just like humans, it never gave the answer. But it was interesting how far it could get just being like, look, I can explain this concept in general, right? And like never engaging with the specificity of it.
Right. All right. Well, there you have it. Mark Andreessen, Steven Pinker, Jan LeCun. Who else was it?
That's right,
Uh,
Yannick. I mean,
the,
obviously,
yeah.
just anybody prominent in the AI field who wants to tell me why we're not doomed. And now, if you want to come tell me why we are doomed, that's going to be less interesting because I just agree with you. But I can potentially interview you or give you some questions. But yeah, but that said, I'm throwing down the gauntlet. Jan LeCun, I'm inviting you to come debate Doom. Yeah, Jan LeCun, Mark Andreessen, Steven Pinker, David Deutsch, or anybody who really believes in all that stuff. And then like there could be people with an interesting mix of views. Like if you're just like a really religious person, if you have a lot of respect within the religious community and you think that everything's going to be fine because God's going to make it fine, you are invited to come tell me why God's going to make it fine. We can see how your opinion. I mean, it's funny, but I've recently been seeing a couple things on the religion side where some people are like, no man, religion makes a ton of sense. Like I know Peter Thiel, obviously a brilliant guy, but he's like a Christian apparently. Like he thinks the Bible has like relevant wisdom for us. Um, and like he sees the world through the lens of like everything is like an analogy for something, and the
Hmm.
Bible has like plenty of good analogies. But like I'm not seeing it, Peter Thiel. I feel like you're really forcing these analogies on us.
All right. Well, maybe we could save that debate for another time because I might agree with Peter Thiel on some of those points.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
Oh, damn.
yeah.
I think I'll probably do a couple of religion episodes because I recently tweeted one of those little comics, like the midwit comics, where I'm like, look, the religion actually has four different tiers. It's the only subject I've seen with four tiers, where the caveman brain is saying like, God is real, and then you've got the midwit being like, God isn't real, and then you've got the smart ninja going like, God is a deeper thing. It's just how we deal with the parts of the universe that we can't access that make it feel like our life is more meaningful.
Okay.
And then you've got a fourth person who's just a higher IQ than all of them, and he's just saying, God isn't real. He's siding with
That's
the
so
midway.
good. Well, it's fitting that you bring up memes here, since a meme is the cover photo of your podcast. So very consistent.
Yeah. So the Fire Dog Coffee meme is a meme that rationalists use a lot. It really speaks to me because it's just like, I really do think the world is burning. Like, I think this is all going to end, this nice human experiment that we've created. And most people are still chilling, right? Like, they were really invested in the idea that, like, no, it's not. It's still going to be kind of normal somehow.
Yeah. So you have a debate. Are we then supposed to pick a winner? Is there a winner in these debates?
I do want to innovate on the format, and actually, a lot of rationalists have been listing ideas that I'm interested in of just like how to make debates better. I think picking a winner is not critical because a lot of the way you got to score a debate like this is it depends on what the audience thought coming in, and like different points can move different people a little bit more. So like voting on who won, I might try that, but I might try like other types of surveys. Um, Audience engagement is interesting. I might start with low audience engagement and just focus on making what I think is a high quality debate, like focusing on the format of me versus the debater versus the
Yeah.
moderator, if there's a third moderator, or if I'm the moderator. Like, so like my high level answer is like, I'm very interested in playing with this because I think that debates are like very important for society, especially for complex topics, especially for topics that we have to hash out before the world ends,
Mm.
right? I think debates are very important, and
Yeah.
I want to do my part in moving the art of debate forward. So more to come on that.
Okay. Nice. That's awesome. I mean, just as a simple way to start, you could do one of those surveys on that Spotify has now for every
Hmm.
podcast. Just have an A or
Yeah.
B type of answer there. Anything else that comes to mind that you want to mention?
Great. No, I'm good with that. And I guess just a meta observation. My approach to this podcast is I'm a big proponent of the lean startup, right? Where it's just like, sure, this is a launch. I've never had a podcast before. It's kind of a big deal for me personally because I love podcasts, but like to the audience, it's not a big deal for you. It shouldn't be. So, and like I can always just go and delete all the episodes and make a new first episode. So because of that, I don't want this to be like a perfect first episode. I just want to start dribbling out more episodes. I think you can expect some random experiments from me, like maybe I'll do an episode that's only 7 minutes. That's just one thought that I have.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
stay tuned for that.
Okay, cool. Well, good luck with the podcast, Liron. I'll be tuning in and hope it goes well.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ori. Just a shout out to Ori. Ori, how can people find you on Twitter?
I mean, they could follow me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is at ygrowthco.
There you go. Because you're into
Sim-
helping companies grow through PR.
exactly.
Sweet. And also, but he's Ori has gotten into the art of going into the archives and finding some very poignant clips of people and then putting them on Twitter and dunking, and he's getting quite good at that.
Your critics might say you just have to dunk on Twitter. What do you say to those people?
So I do enjoy a good Twitter dunk just because it's like, I try to dunk fairly, right? Like I try to dunk being like, hey, here is an actual strong argument why you're very wrong, and somebody in your position would be expected to be more right, but you're not. You're very wrong, right? Like one of my best dunks was like clipping Jan LeCun on Lex Friedman's podcast a few years ago, saying something like, how can an LLM ever understand basic physics? Like if I put an object on the table, I move the table, that's going to make the object move. An LLM's not going to know that. An LLM, even GPT 5000, is never going to tell you that moving the table moves the object. And then I smash cut to GPT 3.5, where you just ask it like, hey, I put an object on the table, I move the table, what happens in GPT 3.5? I was like, oh, well, yeah, so the object on the table is going to move. There's going to be friction. Like there's a
Yeah.
long explanation of like exactly what happens when you push the table.
Cue the
Uh,
moving the goalpost meme gif.
Yeah, exactly, right. And it's a quality dunk because like it wasn't just like, being a dick, right? It wasn't an ad hominem attack. It's like, look, this is your argument and it proved to be very weak. And the fact that you made a weak argument and you didn't like publicly retract it or anything
Right.
is very bad because people look to you for guidance, right? They look
Right.
to you to tell them that you know where things are going and you know why the world's not going to end. And here you are making a really big mistake about your own worldview that really raises questions, and then I package it up in like a tight little dunk, and people enjoyed it on Twitter.
You're just making a small dent in the world with your dunking.
Yeah, exactly right. And it's like, I think in my crypto days, I spent a lot of time dunking on crypto VCs on Twitter, and I do actually think that dunking is part of what got through. I mean, I did get a bunch of journalists coming to me, and it became a mental reference for people when they thought about like, A16Z in crypto. What do those guys know? And they would think to, for example, the time that I clipped Mark Andreessen being totally stumped, deer in the headlights when asked to say something intelligent about the value prop of blockchain technology, just being totally stumped. Like that image for a lot of people who are paying attention, I think is seared into their mind. So like, yeah, I mean, dunks could be a public service. Of course, there's a lot of dunking which I don't agree with, which is basically the ad hominem attacks, right? So it's always been very popular on Twitter and any discourse to make an ad hominem attack and try to pass that off like it's as good as an actual argument, right? As an object level argument. And
Yeah.
I am big on trying to avoid that. I mean, I wouldn't be caught dead, for example, like comparing somebody's beliefs to their appearance, which is like a ridiculous thing. Like, why would anybody ever do that? But of course, you then have Beth Jesus, who loves tweeting about like how he's like working out and he's gonna like beat up scrawny guys while you're. It's this stupid stuff actually is popular, and I don't consider that a valid dunk. And you can even see me on Twitter occasionally saying, "Hey, my bad, I did this dunk. Here's why I did it. I was wrong to do it, right?" So like one or two times a year, roughly, is the frequency with which I'll be like, "Hey, I didn't follow my own rule book, right? Like nobody's perfect."
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so you addressed the Twitter dunking part, but what about the EA affiliation? That totally discredits you, right? You're just bought off by
Oh my
Dustin
god.
Moskovitz. That's where
Wow,
it's coming from.
that's some hard hitting journalism where you're coming on and you got to confront me about my EA affiliation. The
Yep,
you found the underbelly
I
of doing
got you.
debates.
Yep.
Um, so I mean, I never, in my mind, it was never tarnished, right? Like what actually happened? Okay, Sam Bankman-Fried was a criminal, right? And the way, I guess the logic people say is they're like, yeah, he was a criminal because he was using utility theory. He was a utilitarian, and every time that he would scam people, he had an effective altruism cause, which was the reason why he did it. Okay, but I have to stop you there because like I don't actually know any utilitarians who would actually tell you, like, yes, you always have to do this naive calculation of how, like, stealing from people can create more utility and then go steal from them. Like, I don't personally know anybody like that. I'm sure there's some people like that. They're probably psychopaths. Sam Bankman-Fried, there's a good chance he's a psychopath, whatever,
Yeah,
however you define that, right? But like,
yeah,
I don't see him as representative of the AA movement because if you just look at do a cluster analysis, be like, what do AAs actually believe? What do EAs actually behave like? They
yeah,
don't behave like naive utilitarians. They only behave like people who notice that some things happen to have really high utility, like some charities, like a famous example is like Play Pumps International, where they would do pumps that were also children's playgrounds, and they were like terrible water pumps, right? And
mm,
like when you donate to that charity, I see how you make yourself feel so good because you imagine children playing,
yeah,
but that is a terrible place to send your money, right? And
yeah,
if you just send your money to any other charity, that's you can get a 10x increase in utility, right? So EA and like mosquito bed nets, they're just a really good bang for the buck, right? Like the concept of bang for the buck is still very much intact, right? And I've always been an effective altruist in the simple sense that I think we can't lose sight of these like huge, huge gains from making like from basic logical arguments about what money actually helps people survive.
all right, fair enough. It's just part of your contrarian view. You see this as a good way of helping the public.
I don't even think AI is controlling. I actually think that EA is slowly going to take over and just be like the default view. It's almost like, rationalism might have been like a niche movement at one point or whatever you want to call it, but just like the idea that like, look, when we debate things, we don't want to just like invoke God. We just want to use logic and arguments. Whereas now that's like already faded in the background. There's not like a fundamentalist sect that pops up and is like, no, you have to have this whole debate in reference to God. Like we don't even talk about it. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? Like public debate doesn't reference God. Like that whole side is one, and whatever name those people used to go by, they don't even have a name anymore. It's just everybody.
right. I listened to a podcast recently talking about AI risk, and it called the people who were worried about AI risk, they called it a subculture.
A couple of people
Subculture.
on Twitter have attacked me, being like, Liron, I know you're arguing that doom is logically true for all these reasons, but you know what? You're just being religious. This is what religiousness is when people say that the world is going to end and
Mm,
therefore we should like give up everything to stop it from ending.
yeah,
That's basically, end times just like the Bible says.
yeah.
So you can deny it, but I know you're just as religious as anybody, Liron. And I'm like, can you just not call me religious? Like, is there a way to just start from a place of no religion, look at facts, form conclusions using Bayesian reasoning, the same as an AI built from the ground up would do, act
Right.
on those facts, and just not be accused of being religious? Like, what do I have to do? I'm doing my best here to just completely avoid religion. You brought it up. I didn't bring it up. Like, stop accusing me of being religious. I'm really not.
All right, there it is. There you have it. Not religious. It's not a cultural thing. It's just the
That's right.
ideas that
And
you
just
that you
just
subscribe
just
to.
so we sweep out all the accusations out of the way. I just
What
want to
else is
say
there?
very clearly that I'm also not in a cult. I'm not in a
Right.
cult either. Okay, so I
Yeah.
am an effective altruist. I don't think there's anything wrong with being an effective altruism. I don't. I'm not related to Sam Bankman-Fried. Never talked to the guy. Don't think that he's better than a psychopath or a criminal. And yeah, and I'm not in a cult. So you can throw any accusation at me, and that'll probably not be accurate.
Yeah, you live a relatively simple life as far as I understand.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
you're on your computer, you got, wife and kids, and those are
Right.
those are
And I'm
the
open to changing my mind. Like it's very hard to ad hominem. And if somebody manages to sync me with an ad hominem, then that's fine because there's many more like me who, you can't paint with the same brush, right? You've got Jeff Hinton, fortunately recently came out to be essentially an AI doomer. I mean, he doesn't give necessarily a more than 50% chance, but he basically said, "Hey, guys, I'm really worried. AI could have disastrous consequences. It's going to be a master manipulator in society. We're currently not prepared. We should work on being prepared," right? Like Jeff Hinton is saying this stuff, and good luck character assassinating Jeff Hinton. And if you manage to get him, if you catch Jeff Hinton in a sex scandal, then there's still like thousands more like him.
right, right, true. Okay, well, yeah, well, you've got some time to grow this podcast, and hopefully it'll get big before the sex scandal breaks.
Yeah, exactly. All right, I'm gonna use this time wisely before I'm canceled.
Okay.
All right, I gotta go. I gotta go chat on Ashley Madison.
Cool. Have fun.